Right, and we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Tuesday afternoon, and this marks the turn of our live news shows. I've been trying to do the last couple of months, stuff like that, and but we are back, and we will be doing these at least twice a week from here on out. And basically, it's an opportunity for us to engage as rugby fans in between the various rugby weeks and just chat a little bit about everything that's happening because there is a lot that is going on. We've obviously got Springbok squads, which are set to be announced in the next few weeks. We're coming into URC playoffs. We've got an EPCR Challenge and Champions Cup final taking place this weekend. So really, really exciting times if you are a rugby fan because we're now moving into the real busy stuff with regards to the domestic season. And then after that, we then move into the international season, which is starts on 22nd of June with our first game against Wales. So that's going to be fantastic, and really, really excited to see how we can. First of all, what sort of team we send over to Twickenham, as well as what the sort of the general squad and the way we play is going to be. We've got an interesting year ahead for the Springboks with regards to a new World Cup cycle, and obviously that's going to be super interesting how that goes. But in terms of today's show, lots to talk about. We're going to be talking about the SA Rugby transformation progress because the video out yesterday, which detailed the fact that they have not been hitting their targets, for example, and that there could potentially be consequences. And they have then actually come out with a statement regarding the transformation update, basically, and what's sort of going on. And they've kind of hit back a little bit at the media, but I also think there's a certain amount of where there's smoke, there's fire. So I do think that there are genuine issues. But we're going to go through that statement. Mark Alexander sort of very much the one that's sort of quoted in it about what the strategic transformation development plan for 2030 looks like, where they are, as well as, what the plan is for the next few years to try and achieve that plan. Yeah, we're going to talk a little about that. We're going to talk about potentially 4 South Africans being on the radar to play for England. All those players currently playing in the Premiership and some very high-profile players, which are potentially making that. A little bit about that as well. And we'll talk a little bit about Sharks and whether this week can really be an opportunity for them to turn a season around and to salvage a season and what they sort of need to be able to do that. So lots to talk about in the next sort of half an hour. So if you have any questions, anything you want to sort of talk about or want to ask, put them in the comments. Apart from that, make sure you like that video and let's get into it, shall we? So yesterday, I put a video out and it was based on a couple of the articles, mainly the one from a report on Sunday, which said that a 206-page report along those lines had been sent out to all the local unions detailing the sort of progress during the 3 season. And the big sort of red flags was the transformation issue, or the lack of transformation that was happening. And the article detailed the fact that both the Springboks as well as several local unions, in particular the Bulls and Lions, have been unable to hit the transformation targets during 2023. Suggested that there might even be consequences because of that. Now, in response to that article, SA Rugby have released a statement which is titled SA Rugby Very Happy with Transformation Progress. So let's get stuck into it, shall we? And then we'll talk a little bit about where the various articles have merit and what's worth about and what's maybe not worth talking about as well. So over here it says the latest internal audit of SA Rugby Strategic Transformation Development Plan 2030, the STDP, paints a picture of a sport tracking firmly in the right direction, said Mark Alexander, the president of the South African Rugby Union, Monday. He said, and I quote, "Overall, I'm very happy with our performances. The provincial unions all showed massive commitment and passed their self-determined targets. Team demographics are a challenge in some areas, but pathways are becoming better transformed, which is very positive for the future." So now immediately, an interesting thing he's saying there is self-determined targets. So, these are not targets that SA Rugby have said they may have to hit. It sounds like they've kind of said to the local unions, okay, well, what is realistic for you guys to hit? with your current challenges, and they say, cool, this is what we think we can probably do, and they say, cool, stick to that, and they have hit that. We don't know what that is, though, and I would wager, pretty much guaranteed, that it's very much not what the sport and recreation, that is sort of the government policies will be, nor what probably SA Rugby's policy would be in terms of regards to the numbers they would like to hit. He said the STDP 2030 encompasses all areas of endeavour in rugby, including operations such as procurement, governance, staffing, committee, as well as team graphics. That's also quite an important part. It's not just about having players of colour. It's about transforming the administration. It's about transforming the support staff. It's about the way that these unions are run, and transformation is more than just a tick box. Representation with regards to racial groups being represented. It's also about young generation coming through. It's about men and women, for example, and having more sort of women involved in rugby, and trying to really transform all the various different sort of facets that all sort of link together in one big puzzle. And it does have to transform, because the reality is that we go back, 20, 30, 40 years, and everything was being run by sort of white male South Africans. And that's kind of needs to change. It needs to change, but throughout, and this is what I'm saying. It's things like the coaches are so important. And that's why, it's vital that coaches like the SN20 coach, Fana and Claire, who I really rate, gets back, for example. We need to see more of these sort of coaches coming through. So Dea Stick, Deon David's very much, at the forefront of transformation. And that's also an important part, especially also in governance, staffing. So it's not just about the players, not even just about the players and the coach. Who are the physios, who's the administration. When you're looking at the various different sort of unions, and who's making up the boards and stuff like that. It's a lot more than just 23 player the names on a paper. And as Lana said, that transformation is a process, and when you turn on the television and watch rugby at all levels, it's very easy to see the progress we are making on the field. He says what you don't see are the other areas of diversity and inclusions that are advancing at a rapid pace and are covered by the STD30, which focuses on across the game skills and capacity development, demographic representation, performance, community development, and social responsibility and corporate governance. So again, not just about the players you see on the TV, but are there more pathways being created? Are we getting more grassroots programs? Are we getting the communities behind these programs? Are we seeing clubs being backed and clubs sort of growing in the club circuit? That's also an important part. He said, and this is where he does, that improvement is nowhere more obvious than at the level of our national team, where we have made groundbreaking strides under the leadership of Rassie Erasmus. Yes, we have targets for Springboks in demographics, but we also have performance targets. Will not compromise. We are definitely tracking in the right direction on both fronts. So that's a big thing that will sort of allay a lot of fears for rugby fans. He says, there are performance targets which will not be compromised by demographic targets, for example. So, they're not going to pick players for the sake of ticking boxes. They are going to pick a team, a squad, a setup to win World Cups, to win trophies, to be at the top of the level, and they're not going to compromise that. So that is a very big win and a very big positive, that a lot of people are worried about. Are we going to, be compromising the standards of the Springboks to accommodate a rushed, and maybe a very generic, but maybe a very tick box like transformation policy. He says, and this is where he has a go at the media, saying misleading headlines are making a mountain out of a mole heap regarding the transformation outburst in the. Our organization has a much broader lens through which to view the state of play. Inclusion is as equally crucial as is diversity, as it ensures that everyone is treated equally as a voice in the environment. Our commitment extends beyond diverse representation. We are dedicated to fostering an inclusive culture where every player, regardless of their background, feels valued and heard. Sounds great. It does sound great and very easy to say as a administrator. To sort of sit there and say, this is what we want to do and stuff like that. In terms of misleading headlines, well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Again, I think that's a misleading statement itself, because I think various things are true at the same time. I think it is obviously true that the Springboks and provincial unions have not hit the transformation targets from a demographic point of view that have been set out to them. They have basically been told, cool, you need to have this sort of representation by here, by here, by here, and they're not hitting those targets, which is what the article is saying. So, they're not misleading with regards to being factually incorrect. And that's why you can't say that they're incorrect. You say, oh, they're misleading because, they're not thinking of the whole picture. But at the same time, they are correct in saying, well, these unions are not hitting the targets. And what will that mean? If it's a situation of, well, they're not hitting the targets, but, at the end of the day, it means that they need to review, they need to keep sort of working on it, but they're not going to suddenly have funding cuts and stuff like that, then people will be okay. And that's it says, cool, we know we need to transform. We know the transform needs to happen, but how does it happen? And how do we sort of hit these targets? If you can sit there and say, well, we are seeing positive progress and we are seeing these programs working, so it's about being patient and things are going well, great. But the reality is, I said, and this is the big thing that people are worried about for years, is that, government policies and the Department of Sport and Recreation and stuff like that has set up these policies and these targets, and there is the threat of being defunded, for example, or being having their sort of affiliation removed if these targets are not set, are not hit. They haven't yet. There's a big issue there about the protests, and there was talk about protests getting a ban, for example, because of political interference is against a lot of the national bodies' policies, for example. So we've seen various countries, for example, being banned from various unions because of political interference. So that has been always the big problem, and the big worry is that are these transformation policies, are these especially the tick box ones, which have influenced selection in the past. Is this going to lead us down the road where it is classified as political interference, and is there then a possibility of our unions not being or being kicked out of the national body? Which I don't think we need to worry about just yet. I don't think we're quite there, but that is always sort of the worry. That has always been the sort of rhetoric. Well, what does it mean? He finishes by saying the Springboks are the best players available in any calendar year to represent our country. They reflect the funnel of available talent, and real progress is being made in creating opportunities and new heroes for every community. I think that is a very important sentence. They reflect the funnel of available talent. And that's what I was saying yesterday. At the end of the day, and this is why I think, it's been a very interesting conversation with regards to the T20 Cup squad for the Proteas. The Springboks are a representation of what's happening behind the scenes. At the end of the day, they are the very, very top. They are the end of the pyramid. They are the top of the pyramid, end of the funnel, for example, and they reflect what is happening in the country, what is happening at our provincial unions, our universities, our schools, our clubs, for example. They represent the entire rugby ecosystem, and they represent what that funnel is. And if there's not transformation as apparent in the Springboks, it means that there's no transformation in the funnel, and that's where transformation is potentially failing. And is failing, I think. Somebody, as a comment yesterday, and I'd love to fact check it and just check it, but he was, they were basically saying if you look at the top schools in the country at the moment, and you take, the top 5 or 6 countries, whatever, for example, you look at their squads of 30 people, said, it is really concerning how few players of color are involved in those programs, and that is what we mean by the funnel. In that, it's just we're not achieving a representative or representation of players across the country at a high caliber, which is then not going to organically affect in our teams. At the end of the day, as we all say, it shouldn't matter what the team looks like when it comes to a Springbok level. But why is it that 30 years on, it's still so irreflective of the demographics of the country? Now, there are obviously going to be external threats, and facts and stuff like that, and it's not as simple as to sit there and say, cool, the representation of ethnic groups across the racial groups across the country are 10%, 10%, and therefore the Springboks should be 10% this, 10% that. It's not that simple, and should never be that simple. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it, a very unproductive way of looking at it. But, why is it 30 years that a 10% minority group represents an 80% certain sporting codes? And again, it's not necessarily that sporting code's fault. There are so many different facts why this is the case, but just understand why this is happening and how this can potentially change, because there's no doubt that while some, for example, structures and schools, for example, will very much be at the head of transformation, we're embracing it, like Rassie Erasmus has done it so well, there's definitely situations, and I've seen it firsthand, I've been involved in sports administration at various different levels, where there is almost pointedly not any sort of buy-in to try and grow player bases and to try and give opportunities to those that previously have access to them. And what we've seen in your stories, like your your Nicholas is opportunity is the biggest problem for all athletes in the country. It's access, coaches, facilities, structures, opportunities to be noticed. For example, as somebody who goes to a good school is going to trials, is going to clinics, they're going to getting the best coaches. These coaches are then the selectors, and it all becomes a very sort of close knit type of group, and it's very difficult to break in. So that's the big thing: is to break down all those structures at these levels, give the access and the opportunity to as many people as possible. Natural talent, to the cream will rise to the top, as we say. And he then finishes by saying the Springbok team have contributed positively to social cohesion in our country, no doubt. The recent honorary doctorate received by Rassie Erasmus was well deserved because he understands what it means to be a South African. He picks players based on what they can bring to the team, one another. He said the STDP is a process with a finishing line in 2030. The annual reports are a way of measuring progress, celebrating success, and noting areas for eventual improvement. Love to get a hand on this document, and we will try and see if we can get our hands on it and go through it and see where, for example, he says the areas for eventual improvement, where can they improve, where they're not improving, and where do the issues lie. The Springboks are a team that have definitely promoted social cohesion. It's the perfect story, isn't it? I mean, the microcosms of society represented in various different stories told about these players and by these players. I think that's the important. Players have been able to be there and talk about the experience, what worked, what didn't work, what was difficult for them, what changed for them. And it's fantastic having that, almost a bit of a martyr type of team, that right at the top, that's what we want to be at. And we want to get there. And by being, the world champions, there will be literally millions of kids around the country and hundreds of thousands of them that will want to play for the Springboks. The question is, do they have access to everything they need to make that dream a reality? There's no doubt that over the years, there are thousands of talented athletes who are good enough to play provincial rugby, professional rugby, maybe even Springbok rugby, that don't because they don't have access to the structures opportunities needed for them to be able to go from being a talented individual to being a and we've got to be very careful that we don't just throw around a documentary like Chasing the Sun, which is fantastic, without any real change happening in the background. You've got your reason, you've got something to aspire to. I'll give those that are inspired the access they need, the opportunities they need to then become part of the narrative. Don't just build a narrative over a select few and just assume that, well, because we've got a cool documentary that shows on a paid TV network, all of a sudden he's going to have all these players coming through. We're not going to have to worry about transformation. It's all going to take care of itself. We've got to make sure that we are opening the doors all the different places in the country, all the different communities, and that's not just. That's more, for example, than just going into a township and having a rugby clinic. There are certain structures where schools, and you could be at a really good school. You can be at private schools. You can be at a school with a decent rugby program, but because you're not considered a traditionally big rugby school, you won't be looked at by coaches. You won't even have the opportunity to go to trials. I remember checking a Craven Week side, and Craven Week side had, I think, 19 players from one school, and it was the Lions Craven Week side. And you think about the number of schools in Gauteng and the Lions region. Okay, cool. Take away the Victoria schools, but you think about the schools in the Lions region, and I struggle to believe that the reserve tight head, for example, who can't play, who comes off the bench because he's not in the best tight in his team, is better than every single tight head at every other school in this province. Maybe it is the case. I doubt it. I'd be surprised if there's one school which is just so phenomenal that their 22 players or 20 players or whatever it was is literally better than all the other schools around. And I doubt that's true. I think that there's certain schools that certain coaches which get looked at far sooner and far more seriously than other schools. Players get dismissed by saying, cool, well, he's good, but he's playing in a weak league, therefore he's actually not that good. And you don't actually know that, He could be good. He could genuinely be good. And give him the opportunity to play in a better league, and he could be as good. But if he doesn't get the chance, how's he going to prove that? If you're a rugby, for example, the school I went to, I wasn't a great rugby player. I was never going to make it. I never had to worry about that. But I can guarantee you, I was not going to make a Springbok. I was not going to become a Springbok going to the school I went to. If I had maybe played for club, for example, and then got noticed that, or I went to a university and played Varsity Cup, I would have had to have gone that kind of direction. I was never going to make a Craven Week side going to the school I went to. And there are lots of people in a similar situation where they and parents, for example, you don't know if your kid's going to become a Springbok, and some parents, will sit there and be realistic and say, well, the chances are you won't be, so therefore we're going to send you to the best school we can to give you a well-rounded education, good academics, etc., 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 and you can play rugby along the way. Some parents kind of go the opposite and sit there and think, well, we think you're going to become a Springbok, therefore we're going to make sure you go to the right school to get you noticed, to get you into the right programs, to get you into the provincial side, and so it goes. So I think that's an important part of transformation, that it's not about just having local community rugby programs for the underprivileged and township schools. I mean, obviously we know that's an untapped resource. It's still an untapped resource. But it's more than just that. It's also about making sure, like, for example, Varsity Shield and Varsity Cup. Varsity Cup, all of a sudden we were sort of gate-kept with, these are the universities that can produce sportsmen. And the other universities had plenty of talent. And also at the same time, you've only got 5 universities, you've only got 5 squads worth of players. By having a Varsity Shield, a second tier, you suddenly open yourself to another 8 universities, 8 squads. Your player database is growing. And Varsity Cup are picking up players from these things. Herschel Yankees is the World Cup winner. He came from a Varsity Shield university. He would have never been a World Cup winner if it weren't for the Varsity Shield, not just the Varsity Cup, the Varsity Shield. Played in a second tier university competition, and from there, playing for the Springboks, winning World Cup. Now, that's kind of an example of how transforming structures can work. Because if it wasn't for those sort of structures, it wasn't for them having that access and the opportunity, he wouldn't have been noticed and he wouldn't be the player he is. Pio Gianti, for example, it wasn't a great school rugby, went to university, played with a Res League, got picked up. They said, cool, come play for UJ, breakout season, come play for Lions, breakout season, come play for the Box, breakthrough player, World Player of the Year. So I think that's an important thing, that we've got to move away from thinking transformation means more players of color in the Springboks. That is obviously, the end goal is to be representative. And that's unfortunately how we kind of trivialize and we make it seem as if that's what transformation is. Transformation is about a Springbok team that has 10 Black African players, a total of 17 players of color, and we're happy. That's not transformation. Transformation is transforming all our rugby structures so that there's equal access across the country at various different at levels, that, the environment is healthy, the environment is transformative, which acknowledges, welcomes, and accepts those from different environments, different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds, for example, and basically creates a rugby ecosystem which anybody can be part of and thrive. That's the important part, the thriving as well, that everybody part of that ecosystem has an opportunity to thrive in it and reach the top if they are good enough, if they're willing to work, if they are at the level they need to be. But until we open up that access to as many people as possible, we're going to struggle to transform. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know if any of it makes sense, but hey, that's my take on it. I said I've been involved in various sports administration at university levels, at junior levels, at university, inter-university levels and stuff like that. So, you kind of see ways as well. You kind of see where some of the shortcomings potentially are and some out. And fortunately, we judge everything based on what's happening at the top, and we don't realize exactly why that's the issue. But the more you look into the bottom structures and the structures before then, you start to understand why this is so important. And it's simple to just roll your eyes at a national level and say, oh, but this is not important. But it's important because it shows you the failings of what's happening at levels which are relatable to us. Your child playing, your cousin playing, you playing, for you in administration. We can't relate to I can't relate to Peter Steph with regards to his rugby journey, but I might have a child one day, and what does his rugby journey look like, and how does it look like? Do I have to send him to one of 2 schools to be able to get him into a academy side, to get him noticed, to get into to university, get him into Varsity Cup, to get him into union, etc., etc.? Or is it going to be a situation where by the time I potentially might have kids, that the structures are there so I can send them to lots of different schools whilst knowing that there's still the chance for him to or her to that's also obviously the important part. There's far more opportunities for women athletes for them to get to the level that they can reach. So hopefully that's kind of part of that, and that's why I really want to get my hands on this report and understand what are the areas they're focusing at, what are the areas they think they are succeeding, and what are the areas they reckon they are failing at. Because I think that would be a very interesting. But yep, that's my rant over. I've been going for 20 minutes, so I'll cut it short there and move on to another big story which I wanted to cover. But if you have any other thoughts, put those in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. I've seen interesting comments coming out in my initial video about it. Some with a lot of information, which I thought was quite interesting. Some people really dismissive about it. Unfortunately, we can't just be dismissive about it. We've got to engage. Got to engage. I know it's, and I also have days where I'm like, oh, I'm just sick of all these various issues and stuff like that. Not necessarily talking about transformation, just in general. But unfortunately, we've got to engage as sports fans because we've got to get a holistic understanding. We've got to get on board with it. We've got to understand what it means. And some people, they get involved more than just in the comment section. They'll go and say, you know what, look at this. I want to go get involved in my local club or my local school, and I'm going to try and see, how can I be part of the solution and not just become a somebody who just complains about things on social media whilst drinking. That's kind of that. We need people to have buy-in, so support to various programs if we are to continue to how do we become maybe powerhouse? How do we become a sporting powerhouse? We all know that this nation can be. But yes, let's move into this. Speaking of the sporting nation that can be, well, the England Rugby are trying to become a Springboks in terms of just trying to become the world champions, and they are looking at some South Africans to do that. There's apparently a 4 South African wish list, which Steve Borthwick currently has. Guys trying to get a couple of these players to switch allegiance and make them wearing a white in national arena. The first one is from the Leicester Tigers, and that is Arno Liebenberg. So apparently, obviously, with laws going, Borthwick is looking at lots of different options, and we saw some of them during the Six Nations. But apparently, Arno Liebenberg, who played over 100 games for Leicester Tigers, is on the radar for England. He's obviously a former junior Springbok, very talented player, and apparently it looks like he potentially might be available for England at the start of next season, and could get a call up for the tests, which he actually might play against the Springboks. So I think it would be a good signing for them. I mean, well, very comments, it's a concept idea of an international signing, but I think it would be a good acquisition. He's 28 years old, so he's playing, probably some of his best rugby of his career. He's captained Leicester Tigers. He's a leadership type figure, big presence, about almost shy of 2 meters tall, well over 100 kgs, from Brackenfell, so hard as nails. So that'll be an interesting one. Another one is another flank, and that's Jacques Vermeulen for Exeter Chiefs. Massive big ball carrying type of presence. Had a really good season for the Chiefs. He's also a junior Springbok, but didn't really crack a nut when it came to sort of high honours. 29 years old, just turned 29, played a lot of rugby for the Sharks, well, initially for Western Province, then went to the Sharks, playing for Exeter Chiefs since 2019. Similar sort of frame to Arno Liebenberg, maybe even a bit bigger. But again, experienced campaigner and could definitely add a lot to that England side. And then there's 2 backline players. The first one, and this is an interesting one for somebody who never really got the plaudits, maybe a little bit like Jasper Wiese. I don't think he was ever really rated as highly as he probably is now. He was a bit of a journeyman, actually, during his career over here. And that is Bernard Janse van Rensburg, the 7 years old who played for Limpopo Bulls, then Leopards, then Sharks. Played for Pucker as well. But if you go through his senior career, he played for Leopards, Sharks, then to the Southern Kings on loan, then made the move to Free State, played for the Cheetahs quite a few times. He then went overseas to Japan before making the move to London Irish. Now made the move to Bristol Bears, and he's been an absolute standout in the Premiership. Very interesting that he's potentially on the radar. And I do think that centre is a position that England have sometimes struggled to get things right, to get it right. They've brought in a lot of different people, for example, and nobody, I don't think, is really sort of tied down. So you play at 12 and 13. So obviously option there. I think England, yeah, they need a centre. They need centres. You know, they keep going back to Mono Tuilagi, which sort of shows you that they struggled really to find someone to take up the mantle. So I think he'd be an interesting one. And then the other one is somebody who's been on a lot of people's radars and a lot of conversations about him, and that is Tyrone Green. The Harlequins fullback has arguably been the best fullback in the season. He can play 11. Fantastic counter-attacking player. He also played for Junior Springboks and made the move during COVID. He was fantastic for the Lions. He really was. I think if he had stayed at the Lions, he'd probably be on the Springbok radar. And he's been quite open about the fact that he wants to play international rugby. And I think he's a bit like a Ruben Ackerman, probably like all four of these players. They'd love to play for the Springboks, but that opportunity is not going to come for them. And it's, well, you can play England, but you're not going to play international rugby. Then they're going to go for England. And why not? I've never had a problem with it. I know some people don't get it. You know, playing your country, calling the traitor. I don't think it like that at all. At the end of the day, you know, it's so difficult to become a Springbok, but this is a global world we live in. And if you make the move, for example, I mean, Tyrone Green's 4 years into his England career. Document's been there since 2019. Liebenberg's been there also for a long time. And if they feel the adopted nation is one they want to represent, then why not? Yeah, Liebenberg's there since 19, been there for 5 years. He spent more time playing in the Premiership than he has for the Bulls. So he made about 60, 70 caps for the Bulls, as well over 100 for Leicester Tigers. So he's played more rugby in the UK than he has in South Africa. So if he feels he wants to represent them, then why not? And I think it's cool. I think it's a great testament to the talent of this country if we do see our players. You know, for example, I keep saying we should be celebrating a Carl Stade, a Duan-van-der-Merwe, for example, not berating them and saying, oh, well, they wouldn't have been good enough for the Springboks. It's not about that. It's about the fact that, these players, Bloomers, for example, for whatever reason, due to different factors, didn't get the chance. They went overseas. They're making a living, and cool. We've now produced some great world-class players. Why don't we celebrate that? I do think Duan-van-der-Merwe could play for Springboks. I think he goes in the environment, and given his work on stuff like that, I do think he could work there. But I think it's just for me, I just find it a bit of a weird reaction that as soon as we see a South African-born player playing for another country, we default back to, well, he wasn't good enough for us. Just appreciate what they are. At the end of the day, that's we produced their talent. They had their learnings down here. Much like people will celebrate someone like Elon Musk. I personally don't claim him, but we celebrate South Africans achieving everywhere else in the world except for in the sporting realm, where we then just decide their traits because they're representing South Africa. A weird kind of vibe, isn't it? Yeah, that's an interesting one. So those four players are on the England radar. And that, as I mentioned, is Bernard Jansen van Rensburg, Hanno Liebenberg, Jacques Vermeulen, and Tyrone Green. The last thing I want to talk about is the Sharks, who are playing on Friday. And they've got a chance to salvage their season. They cannot make the Champions Cup or the URC playoffs. They currently sit down at a very woeful 13th on the log. In terms of playoff positions, they are 20 points behind. Where potentially position 8th, so they've had an absolutely dreadful URC season, but they could yet first of all qualify for the Champions Cup, and second of all come away with the trophy if they were to win it at Friday night at Twickenham in the Challenge Cup. So a potential season salvaged for the Sharks. The question is, do they kick on? And if they don't win the Challenge Cup, it's amazing. It's a bit like Manchester United. I'm a United fan, and we've got the FA Cup final on Saturday. Sharks have had a dreadful league season, their league season being the URC, but a win on Friday suddenly means that they could qualify for the Champions Cup. So it's the same as if they finished top 8, and they add a trophy to their cabinet. And is that a more successful season? For example, I mean, what's going to piss me off is if the Lions finish 8th and the Sharks win, and we don't get that spot in the Champions Cup. But is that a more successful season, for example? Then that's been a great season. But if they don't win, then it's been an awful season. So it's amazing how 180 minutes is going to define the season for the Sharks. For example, the Lions, if they make it to 7th and they guarantee a Champions Cup place and they bomb out in quarters, I don't care. Successful season, we'll see you in the Champions Cup next season. I think the Bulls, for example, they're in to try and win the URC. I think nothing short of winning a URC will be a bit of a failure for them because they've been trying to add silverware. They're a squad that's add silverware. They're 2 points behind Munster. They're ahead of Leinster and Glasgow Warriors, and they can stay ahead of them as long as they get a bonus point win in their last game. So they're going to have a home quarterfinal. If they win it, they could even have a home semi-final. If Munster were to get knocked out, they could even have a home final. So I think for them, for example, only winning silverware would be a successful season. Stormers, I think their season's been a bit of a step back. I think they'll be glad that they're still in sort of 5th place. I think semi-finals will probably be a good season for them. But for the Sharks, they have to win a trophy, don't they? Otherwise, it will be an absolute stuff-up and a disaster season for them, who are starting to look at their best. I mean, pulled off a miracle job to get to that final. The question is, can they do it once again against a very, very good Gloucester side on Friday evening? We will obviously be live for that game as well, so you can come and join us. So go into some of the comments. Matthew Dixon earlier saying it is all about building the structures and formation of competitions that promote competition between each other. I like that. John Stewart saying if we're winning, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Leave Russie and co clearly know what they're doing. Jan HB saying playing for another country is a good thing if they qualify. They deserve that. Good on them. I 100% agree. I like that attitude. And then John saying, Stevie, if there's one thing I can ask of you, no matter how big a channel gets in the future, don't take it rid of the original green screen. Talking about, I suppose, because I'm pointing at my actual green screen and I suppose pointing at the office. No, I think the OG office will stay. I like my OG office. It was one of the first things I did. The watch long studio, that might change, obviously has changed as we've gotten going. Just that's more about bringing in more things, more elements which you guys can enjoy. But my OG watch long studio, I'm very fond of it. I don't think this will 10 years time if we're still doing this, we'll be at you. People, thank you very much for joining me. It's been fun getting back onto the live streams. We will be doing this more, so make sure you come and join us. We'll try and do some lunchtime shows, maybe even do some morning shows. We'll even put out a poll to find out kind of what sort of times these shows you enjoy and base things like that. But keep well, keep safe, and we will see you guys all